This is a thrill for me to be here today. It's a story and multiple stories that I just love repeating. In the lead up to the Olympic Games, I was a guest speaker 177 times. And I promised to take people in behind the Olympic curtain and give them a bit of a look at what happens there. So look, just to kick it off this morning, we've had the Olympic rings up there, and it's sort of timely because it's, leading almost to Paris. And every day we're hearing, positive and negative stories about the Olympic Games in Paris. I'm sure they will be wonderful. There's already some really, really interesting things coming out. The opening ceremony, if you haven't heard, is going to be on the Seine River. Imagine, the athletes will be on barges coming up the river. The people will be sitting in stands by the riverbank. So the French are going about this in a very, very creative way, and I think it'll be wonderful. We just have fingers crossed that no ill harm comes to those games. So I'm sure you, like 97% of the world, knows exactly what this logo is. It's one of the world's most recognised logos, and it dates back to Pierre de Coubertin, who's known as the father of the modern Olympics, and it was created in 1913, so it's still going strong. The 5 rings were intended to refer to a unified world. And there is a lot about the Olympic Games that is about unity and about coming together. So the 6 colours represented colours that you can find in almost any flag across the world, of any country. But I want to get to know a little bit about you. So tell me, has anyone here been an Olympian? Or had a family member an Olympian? Yes?
Yeah, a family member in England was a rower.
A rower, fantastic. There we are, we don't have to go far to find that. Anyone here attended the Olympic or Paralympic Games in Sydney? Lots of you, wonderful. Anyone volunteered for the Olympics? Okay, I've got I'm in my little kit of things here. This is the very famous shirts that were worn by the volunteers. The volunteers did Australia very, very, very proud. And you may not be aware, but this difference in the sleeve colours represented the different areas where the Paralympians worked, where the volunteers worked. So how many of you heard those famous words? What was it? And the winner is Sydney. And how thrilling was that to hear? I did shake hands with this man. I met him on one occasion. But is there anyone else here who's been involved in any way with the torch relay? Do we have any torch bearers?
No, but I actually nominated one of my nieces who was a torch bearer.
Fantastic. Another one? Yes?
My father was a torch bearer.
Wonderful. Where did he have his run?
Up in McLean on the north coast.
Brilliant. Wonderful. Okay. So look, the quote from this guy: Olympism is the marriage of sport and culture. Sport is a major factor for promoting world peace, friendship, cooperation and understanding amongst peoples. And I guess I'm fortunate that I've had a really, really close look at that, and I've seen it in action. You'd be surprised the number of marriages that come inter-country because people met at an Olympic or a Paralympic Games. And endless friendships that go on and on and on forever. So you probably recall that Sydney was the 15th of September of 2000, and the closing ceremony was the 1st of October. So magic days. Sydney, the sun shone. There was a great get-together at Luna Park of all the people, the staff of SOCOG, and those of us from sponsors who'd been very involved. And I vividly recall Sandy Holloway, who was the CEO, with one arm around a woman called Di Henry, who was the manager of the whole of the torch relay, and he's got another arm around me, and he just smiling at a camera and saying, "To die for." He was a delightful man. This is the world's biggest event. the Olympic Games. Now, those of you who put an event together, you know there's a lot of things you've got to think about and a lot of things you've got to do. But this event, Sydney, and by the way, I am going to refer to Sydney Olympics, I'm going to refer to Paralympics, and I'm going to refer to torch relay. So we may have to skip through some of those very quickly because time is my enemy today. So here's a little snapshot. 199 countries, 10,000 plus athletes, 7,000 technical officials. We often forget about them. We've got to have those technical officials and judges there. 21,000 accredited and 7,000 non-accredited media. Media are in full force. 28 sports for Sydney, 300 events, and more than 700 medals provided. 100 venues, and think of this, 1 million visitors to Sydney. It's massive. So people often ask me, well, Di, how did you get so involved? So my story is that I was the sales and marketing director for Adecco, which was is a global multi-billion-dollar organisation mainly in staffing, recruitment across the world. And so I had worked with some companies that Adecco took over, and so here I was, sales and marketing director for Australia, when we decided that we would become friends of the bid. Some of you may have read or know of this, of Rod McGeoch, who led the bid. It's considered to be one of Australia's greatest marketing achievements ever. And if you want a great book to read, this is fantastic if you love learning about how this all came together. So we had become friends of the bid, which meant we were providing temporary staff to the organisation for a very, very reduced fee. But it burnt a flame in us. Wouldn't it be fantastic to have a further involvement? If we win, if Australia wins, if Sydney wins, wouldn't it be great to be involved? So it was in 1996 that companies were invited, any company at all was invited to put in an expression of interest. So this was the expression of interest that we put in from Adecco. And I guess what we were trying to do was to demonstrate our capability. There wasn't a lot of detail that we could actually refer to, so we were pulling out all stops to show that we would be capable and that we understood a lot about Olympics. I'm going to leave these over on the table if anyone wants to look through them later. So from that, 66 companies put in an expression of interest. Then there were 6 companies, and we were one of them, selected to put in a very, very detailed presentation. And this is it here. At that point, we were actually given some numbers. Now, you imagine, so I know there are a few HR people in the room, you imagine having to project what your staffing needs might look like for the organising committee over a 5-year period. How close do you reckon you'd get? It was tough, really, really tough. So we went along with it. We put in our bid. And I cannot begin to describe to you how desperately we wanted to win that. The executive committee, we would meet every morning to say, what else have we thought of? What else can we add? What else can we change? What else can we do? And there was a 2-hour presentation to a panel, a so-called panel. And they sat there with stony faces. They gave not a glimmer away, so you could not read whether they liked what you had to say or not. But we were in full force, we had it all planned. So then there was a delay, as there always is. Weeks went by. Finally there was a phone call. My secretary said to me, Ian Clubb, who was the HR director for the organisation, and John Moore, who's the marketing director, they want to meet with you on Tuesday after Easter, and they'll come to you. So in my head, I'm thinking, oh no, after all this work, are they coming to say thank you, but no thank you? Why are they coming to me? Is it because they feel so sorry that we've done all this work and they're coming to say, no, it's not you? So here's the scene. They came to our boardroom, big long table, myself and a colleague sitting at this end, these 2 guys down that end. Truly, I'd had enough. I was still very polite, but I said, good morning, gentlemen. Cut to the chase, where are we at? So one looked at the other looked at the other, and then Ian Clubb, who has a very soft voice, he said, well, Di, I've got to tell you, I was having this out-of-body experience. I'm floating on the ceiling thinking, no, don't say the words. And then he kind of said something like, so based on all of that, we're really looking forward to working with you. And I said, you mean we've won? He said, yes, you've won. It's you. We picked you. I totally lost the plot. Now, I understand that PROBA stands for Professional and Business. I was very unprofessional. I ran to the end of the table. I threw my arms around the first guy. I kissed him. I went to the next guy. I kissed him. I said, I've got to go and get some of the other members of the group. So I ran up the hallway to one of the other senior managers, who was a very, very dour guy. And I said, hey, we've won. This guy leapt out of his seat. He picked me up in a bear hug. He swung me around the room, and we ran like two children down the hall. It was just the most amazing, magical moment. I hope I've described that adequately for you, because it was just incredible. But then the hard work commenced. Our task was to provide the staff for the organising committee. And so we set up an Olympic recruitment centre, and over the years we put more than 5,000 people into SOCOG across lots of different jobs. We were called the Staffing Services Supporter for Sydney 2000. It was recruitment, it was industrial relations, it was career support. It was a very, very varied role. The share price for this public company rocketed to the roof, and the global CEO rang me and he said, shares can go up, shares can go down, don't stuff up. So we soon realised we needed somebody with, senior firepower to head up this. I've always loved sport, and I could think of nothing better than to put my hand up and say, pick me, I'll do it. So I became National Director Olympic Programs, and that was my job for the next few years. I was in and out of SOCOG. I had a pass that got me in and out at any time. And, those of you who've been in the world of recruitment, to me, recruitment is often the window to an organisation. You learn so much about an organisation through jobs and through people. Not only that, but you then market, because you're a champion. You market your capability, and you talk to all these other organisations and say, if you need Olympic staff, you better talk to us, because we're in the tent. So that led to us winning 150 other customers who are Olympic impacted organisations, and we provided more than 5,000 staff to them too. Just a little project of more than 10,000 people.
I was one of those staff. I was employed by a decade.
Brilliant. I'll talk to you later about that. Fantastic. So one thing I do want to just point out, which a lot of people don't appreciate, is that from Atlanta to Sydney, it was the first back-to-back games in 60 years that had a common language. So our ability to learn from Atlanta was amazing. I was actually given the opportunity by the company to spend a week in Atlanta, and I visited lots of... It was after their games, but I went from one sponsor to the next had lined up all these appointments. They welcomed me with open arms. In fact, they would say to me at the end of a meeting, now, where are you going next? How are you getting there? I said, I'll get a cab. No, we're driving you. So again, the ability to learn was just such a privilege at that time. So then I was seconded to SOCOG, and I was there for about 3 months. And my task was to do what's called the concept of operations for Games workforce. Now, every facet of an Olympic Games has a concept of operations. And these are very, very detailed research and documents that are then presented to the board of SOCOG and then to the International Olympic Committee for approval. So one of the problems that Atlanta faced was people and jobs. They underestimated just how many pairs of hands they would need. and it became a real problem. So we were trying to do everything in our power to make sure we were way, way, way ahead of the game for the people that were needed for the Olympic Games in Sydney. Especially when you consider, we used to say, there are more people in the suburbs of Los Angeles than in the whole of Australia. Where are we going to get all these people? And how and who and what? So my task was, and it ended up a 100-page document, to look at, these were the definitions that were used for the different types of labour. Paid, these were the staff of SOCOG. Volunteer, lovely people like this. Contractor, those were all the main categories that needed huge, vast numbers of people for contractors, 65,000 more. I think some people estimate it as 85,000 people in these kinds of roles. And then, of course, the 28,000 technical officials. It's big, huge. People say to me, well, were there any quirky jobs? So the most unusual from a title was a vexillologist. So imagine you get a phone call, oh, we need a vexillologist, thank you. Hello, does anybody have any idea what a vexillologist is? It's a person who's an expert in the protocol of flags. And when you think about the Olympic Games, there's flags everywhere, and there's flags in the ceremonies, and there's protocols. You can't put the flag upside down. You can't put it the wrong way round. So we actually ended up providing 2 fantastic people, both of whom had come out of the Navy. And if you think about that, they learn lots about flags. So then another interesting role was a zoologist. Why would you think we'd need a zoologist for an Olympic Games?
Horses.
Not the horses.
Dog-smelling dogs?
No. The first village that opened, and it was massive, was the media village, because they always come into town early. And so SOCOG, in its wisdom, knew that international visitors loved to see Australian animals and birds. So they set up like a little zoo at the media village. Beautiful aviaries of birds, wallabies, kangaroos, all sorts of things. They were the most photographed creatures on the face of the earth, I think. It was a brilliant strategy to do that, and of course we needed somebody who would look after those. Right late in the piece, we got a call, we need 140 laundry attendants. And you think, who's going to want to be a laundry attendant? We were swamped with people. People just wanted to be part of it. And those laundry attendants had the most wonderful time, because their job was to go in and out of the athletes' village, pick up the smalls in a little bag, take them and put them in these giant washing machines and take them back. They made extraordinary friends. They had pins, swapping pins, all sorts of things like that. So, but let's move to, we used to say for the Olympic Games. Now, when you see those numbers that I just put up before and 1 million extra visitors, imagine if the restaurants or if the athletes' village was told, sorry, we've run out of eggs. So I use that as an example of the detail. There was no stone left unturned in having to consider everything and anything. Makes you wonder, makes you start to see why it takes 7 years for this monster to get put together. But when we sit and we watch it on television, we never think of any of this. It just washes over us and we just enjoy the sport. So I was a speaker many times for universities, and I thought I have to have an engaging topic. So my topic was eggs, beds and condoms. And so there's the egg story, the bed story, and I'd get these young people to consider, if you were the program director for the athletes' village and you've got to work out the requirements for the beds. Because athletes are all sizes and some of them are monsters. So you've got to make sure that there's enough beds. We can't have an uproar because the beds aren't properly provided. And then, of course, Pacific Dunlop and one of its companies, Ansell, was the one that had to provide the condoms. So the question is, well, how many? And I can tell you it was 200,000. But I can also tell you, I read just recently that for Paris, it's 300,000. So, okay, so let's move on now to the torch relay. So the torch relay was a whole new, not a new, but every Games has to design its own relay. The relay route, the plan, you can see that we took the relay, the torch out through the Pacific countries, kind of uniting them as part of our friends and neighbours. And then within Australia, the plan was that 80% of the population would be within 1 hour of the torch relay. So many, many, many people would have the opportunity of going to see it. How many of you saw part of the torch relay as it went by or somewhere? Okay. So, and every country also looks to do something special that's, a bit different to what everybody else has done. So our bit special, first of all, I just point to the picture over here because this is me in ancient Olympia. Anyone been to ancient Olympia? If you go to Greece, I encourage you, go to this magical, wonderful place. It'll blow your mind. Here I am standing in front of the temple of Diana and temple of Zeus, temple of something, where the torch is lit for every Games. And then the torch is put into several miners' lamps. Does it ever go out? Yes, but then there's always the backup in other miners' lamps all through. So our something different was, yes, for the first time ever, the torch was taken underwater. Don't ask me the technicalities of how they did it, but they did it, and brilliant photographs beamed across the world. And then who will ever forget the moment that Kathy stood there and we all held our breath because the part of the flame got stuck and it went on and on. I was there, opening ceremony. Anyway, finally it came good and it was just a magical, magical moment. So that leads me to the fact that at one point during my time as National Director of the Olympic Program, we got a new CEO, and this guy was from America. He had been the youngest ever US Army General. Delightful guy. And the first time I met with him, he said to me, "You got to get me that torch." And I said, "Well, actually, Ray, I always thought that if you became a sponsor, you automatically got involved with the torch relay." To get in at the lowest possible level was $250,000 cash. And that gave you 15 relay spots. Gave you lots of other, there were other benefits, but 15 relay spots. So I said, "Well, Ray, you want to spend another $250,000? "Oh, no." I said, "There's got to be a way, got to be a way." He said, "If you can think of a way, you come to me and you tell me." So I had been fortunate enough to have gone to 3 international conferences with senior leaders from the company. So I knew many of the other managers, country managers around the world. And I thought, if we can sell some of these spots off to other country managers and we just keep 6 for us and we have 2 for clients, we do a competition for clients and we do a competition for temps. We have 2 for temps and 2 for internal staff. We're there. We can be involved with the torch relay. So, long story short, that happened. He said, "If you can sell them, we'll do it." So I'm on the phone to all these people painting this picture. Imagine coming to Australia and running with the Olympic torch. Or it could be someone from your team. You could put on a competition, the top salesperson or this or that or the other or peer nomination or whatever you like. So it all happened. But with only 6 for us kept domestically, Ray and I looked at each other and we said, it'd be so wrong for us to take a torch relay spot, even though we both would have, given our all for it. So I set up a meeting for Ray with Di Henry, who was the head of torch relay. And so here we are, we've got the meeting. The corporate office was in Melbourne at that stage. He flew up, we had this meeting, sat down. I said, thank you for meeting with us, Di. I wanted you to meet Ray. You need to meet each other because, you know, we're in the torch relay now. But I said, the real reason we're here is I'm here to beg. He's a runner. If you could just find one extra spot, do you think you could give it to him? And he sits up straight and says, no, that's not why we're here. If you find one other spot, we wouldn't be doing this without her passion and her this, and he raved on and on and on. He said, so if you find one, it goes to her. So she said, leave it with me. She rang about 3 weeks later. It was like, Di Henry's on the phone. She said, Di, I've got some news. Yes, I'm giving you 4 spots. It was late in the program. They happened to be ones that were a bit remote and ones that were difficult to fill at a late stage. So we gladly grabbed those, and he said, right, you're having one, I'm having one, and we'll give the others to other really worthy people in the organisation. So my spot was in Broken Hill. Now, not only did the company send me to Broken Hill, paid for my husband, paid for Matt, paid for his sister. This is his sister Bella here. She turned up at my torch relay spot, and she's got her Red Devil's horns, her Red Devil's trident, and she's wearing her full-length ball gown. I might need somebody to help me with this, but she's wearing the red sash, which I have. Can you see what it says? My mum's flamin' great. So that was a beautiful surprise for me, and of course it took the eye of the photographers who are on the truck that precedes you on the torch relay. And I have my torch here today. So here it is. Here's the magic. It's been pierced, so it can't be used again. And this represents the Opera House, of course. So it's a beautiful piece. My torch has been to many, many, many places. It's been to schools, it's been to aged care places, and I've loved sharing it, and people just love having their photo taken with that torch. It's quite magical. I'm going to move on now and tell you a little about the Paralympic Games. So we might think that's just the little games that happens after the big games. The Paras like to call the Olympic Games the practice and the Paralympic Games the real deal. But it is actually it is the 3rd largest event that happens in the year of the Games. So the Paralympic Games, and para, by the way, means parallel. Some people think it's paraplegic or something similar, but it's parallel to the Olympic Games. Paralympic, Olympic, Paralympic. So Sydney had 3,871 athletes. It had 123 countries, 550 events, 21 sports, and bursting full stadiums because they shipped lots and lots and lots of school children. There are many school children who, to this day, have the memories of the Paralympic Games burnt into their psyche, which was a wonderful thing to do. But for the athletes, it was such a joy to have full stadiums and people cheering for them. And so at the closing ceremony of the Olympic Games, the number of athletes that walked past, and whatever they could get their hands on to write a message, even bed sheets, said, "Thank you, Sydney," because they were treated to such wonderful service, respect, and it was magical. This was just one of the scenes from the opening ceremony. So I was fortunate to have opening, closing of Olympic Games and opening, closing of Paralympic Games. So it was during my time as heading up the sponsorship that I was invited to join the New South Wales Paralympic Committee. Now this was not an organising committee, this was a committee whose main objective was to build awareness, help with fundraising for athletes. And I went on from there after the Games to become the chair of that New South Wales Paralympic Committee. And at an event that was an art show put on by Mossman Council, I sat across the table from this cheeky young bloke, and his name was Kurt Fernley. How many of you have heard of Kurt Fernley? This is Kurt. This book is gold. This is his story. So Kurt's sitting opposite from me, and I heard him talking about how he's going to Athens. And I said, well, we're going to Athens. John and I are going to be at the Paralympic Games in Athens. Oh, that's great. Anyway, he got up to give his little talk, and amongst it he said, oh, we've done really well with our fundraising. He came and sat down opposite me, and I said, Kurt, we're here to get these people to dig deep. You've just told them we've done really well with our fundraising. I said, you might be covered, but think of all those other guys and gals who could go if there was more funds. He went, oh no. Now again, my HR friends, you know the way people take feedback says a lot about them. This young man, the next occasion he had to be on stage to draw out a lottery, a ticket or something in a raffle, he said, oh, by the way, I have to clarify something. When I said we've done really well with our fundraising, I'm covered, but there's a lot of them that aren't, so please dig deep. So we just knew immediately this young man was really special. And we got back from Athens after, in fact, we'll flick to the next slide, because this was John and I in Athens. We actually had a volunteer role. We were out at a hotel by the ocean in Glyfata, of those of you who've been to Athens, and we were the sub-site managers and for the sailing team and for the road cycling team, because it was just too far for them to the athletes' village. So it was a joy actually spending the time living with them and helping them with any of their questions and so on. So we came back from Athens, and John and I decided, let's sponsor Kurt Fernley. Because Paralympians, it has improved, but back then their ability to get funding was really, really poor. And so we did organise to be Kurt's very first ever sponsor. We had a tiny little mention in his book, and we sponsored that wonderful young man for 12 years. Those of you who's followed his career would know that he is now the chair of the NDIS board, and he's gone on to do amazing, wonderful things. So, including crawling the Kokoda Trail. Some of you may recall that as well. So that was 2004. This is 2008, where once again, John and I are with the Paralympic sponsors and supporters, and this is Beijing. So you remember the Bird's Nest, which was a marvellous building in China, in Beijing. But I want to share this story with you. Those of us who were there with the Australians, we had a meeting presenting. Somebody from the Olympic Committee presented to us, and they said, look, we've got these 2 blow-up kangaroos. We want people, who would like to take them? We need them out there, we need them at the events. So finally, another young woman and myself said, yeah, okay, we'll take them. You can tell I'm shy and retiring, and anyway, so I thought I'd take one. So I took this big fellow here. Well, I got to tell you, everywhere we went with our kangaroos, which, by the way, were made in China, we were mobbed. We were rock stars. Everybody wanted to crowd around us and have their photo taken. So we decided to take them on an outing one day, and it was onto the Great Wall. So here the big kangaroo is, with John and I on the Great Wall, and along came a group of Americans, and one of them said, oh my goodness, we work with an Australian guy back in the States. You just wait till I get back and tell him there were kangaroos on the Great Wall of China. So our Paralympic journey continued to London, which was 2012. And the London Games were magnificent. The people we spoke to openly said we wanted to do everything that we could to be better than Sydney. Now, it was incredible though, 12 years on, the advance in technology that meant that they could do so many amazing things with technology. So the London Paras had 4,302 athletes, 164 countries. We got into a car, one of the cars, just outside our hotel, which was for the Paralympic family, and drivers would take you anywhere. But of course, these days, they didn't have to get lost because they had sat-nav in all the BMWs. Even just that, Atlanta was terrible. Buses got lost, cars got lost. So then, to sort of round out my involvement in Olympic experience, I actually left Adecco. Sometimes when you move out to left field, it's hard to get back into the organisation, so I was offered a redundancy, which I took. And the first thing that I was picked up for doing research, who said they love research? It was you, wasn't it? Yes. So this was a research to put together this book, The Collaborative Games, with a guy, thank you Matt, with a guy called Tony Webb. And I'm honoured, this is my book, which is signed by Tony, and this was what he has in his introduction. Perhaps the most significant, certainly the most personal acknowledgement is to my colleague Di Pass, who did more than just assist with the research but contributed significantly to both the content and, as important, the balance with which we tell the story. And then, in closing, SOCOG was so focused, they desperately wanted Juan Antonio Samaranch to say those magic words, which he did. I declare Sydney 2000 the best Olympic Games ever. Thank you very much.
Aussie, Aussie, Aussie.
Aussie, Aussie, Aussie. Oi, oi, oi.